I watched my mother's fingers drum against my apartment door, the same impatient rhythm that used to make my stomach clench. Through the peephole, I could see my father standing behind her, hands in his pockets, wearing that look of mild annoyance he reserved for me. My sister Melissa leaned against the hallway wall, scrolling through her phone with her newly manicured nails, the ones I'd paid for in my previous life. "Sarah, we know you're in there," my mother called, her voice saccharine sweet. "We just need to talk to you about a small loan. It's urgent." A small loan. The words that had destroyed me before. I smiled, feeling the weight of the Black American Express card in my pocket. The one they didn't know existed. The one connected to an account with 3.2 million in it. "Coming, Mom? I called back, smoothing down my casual t-shirt and jeans. Let them think I was still the same broke 24-year-old they'd bled dry. Let them think they could do it again. I opened the door and my mother's face lit up with that particular expression she wore when she wanted something. Love and disappointment mixed together, seasoned with just enough guilt to make it work. "There's my baby girl," she said, pushing past me into my apartment. The same modest one-bedroom in Queens I'd rented in both lives. No reason to show my hand yet. "You look thin. Are you eating enough? You work too hard at that little job of yours." That little job. I was currently the anonymous investor behind 3 of the hottest tech startups in New York. But to them, I was still Sarah Chen, the failure daughter who worked as a data analyst for $55,000 a year. "What do you need, Mom?" I asked, closing the door as my father and Melissa filed in. My sister wrinkled her nose at my apartment the same way she had before. Some things never changed. "Your father's restaurant needs a bit of capital," my mother began, settling onto my secondhand couch like she owned it. "Just $50,000 to get through this rough patch. You know how hard the pandemic was on small businesses?" $50,000. In my previous life, that request had come 3 years ago when I was 21. I'd given them everything. My entire savings from years of part-time jobs, scholarships, and scraping by. They'd promised to pay me back in 6 months. They never did. Instead, they came back, again and again, for Melissa's wedding, for the down payment on their new house, for Melissa's husband's business opportunity. Each time, I gave them everything, because they were family. Because my mother cried. Because my father looked disappointed. Because Melissa called me selfish when I hesitated. I'd died at 28 with $847 in my checking account, drowning in credit card debt, in a hospital bed I couldn't afford from an illness I'd ignored because I had no insurance. My family hadn't even paid for my funeral. They'd cremated me at the cheapest place they could find and scattered my ashes in a public park to save on burial costs. Then I woke up on my 21st birthday 4 hours before my mother called to ask for that first $50,000. "I don't have that kind of money," I said, which was technically true about my checking account. I kept exactly $3,000 in there, enough to look believable. My mother's face fell. "Sarah, don't be difficult. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. This is what family does." "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious," my father added, his voice carrying that edge of annoyance. "The restaurant is going under. We could lose everything." The restaurant they'd bought with my money. The restaurant where Melissa's husband Tom worked as manager while doing nothing. The restaurant they'd never put my name on, despite promises. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice soft and apologetic. "I really don't have it. I have bills, student loans." "Student loans we helped you with," my mother cut in sharply. The mask was slipping already. It had taken longer last time. "We co-signed those loans. We took on that debt for you." They'd co-signed because I couldn't get enough financial aid otherwise, then held it over my head for 7 years. In my previous life, they'd never made a single payment on those loans, but they'd certainly used them as leverage. "What about your savings?" Melissa chimed in, finally looking up from her phone. "You've been working for 3 years. You must have something saved up." In my previous life, I'd stammered and admitted I had $52,000. They'd taken all of it that same day. "I have about $3,000, I said, meeting her eyes. "That's it." The silence that followed was arctic. 3,000? My mother's voice went shrill. What have you been doing with your money? Do you know how irresponsible? I have expenses, Mom. Rent, utilities, food, transportation, it all adds up. We have expenses too, she snapped. Real expenses, a mortgage, a business. We have actual responsibilities, not just some tiny apartment and a sad little life. There it was, the contempt they'd always felt, finally spoken aloud this early. Usually it took them a few more months to get here. My father stood up, his face hard. I think you're lying. I think you have money and you're being selfish after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I repeated softly. Everything like ignoring me my entire childhood because I wasn't as pretty as Melissa. Everything like forgetting my birthday 3 years in a row. Everything like telling me I should be grateful they let me eat their food. Everything like taking credit for my scholarships as their good parenting. Don't take that tone, he warned. We're your parents. You owe us respect. You owe us support. I'd caved here in my previous life, started crying, apologized, promised to find the money somehow. I'd taken out credit cards, borrowed from friends, worked 3 jobs. I'd destroyed my health and my future to fill the bottomless pit of their needs. I'm sorry, I said again. I wish I could help, but I can't. My mother stood abruptly. Fine. Don't come crying to us when you need something. Don't expect us at your wedding, whenever that happens. Don't expect us to care when you're old and alone. They'd said almost the exact same words before. It still stung, even knowing how hollow the threat was. They'd never been at anything that mattered to me anyway. They left in a flurry of slammed doors and muttered insults. Through my window, I watched them get into the BMW I'd helped pay for in my previous life and drive away toward the house I'd funded. I pulled out my phone and opened my investment account. $3,247,893.47. It had been $1,000 3 years ago, on my 21st birthday, when I'd woken up with memories of a life not yet lived. I'd invested every penny I could scrape together into Bitcoin when it was still under $10,000. Then into a small startup called Zoom right before the pandemic. Then into GameStop, riding the meme stock wave. Then into a dozen other opportunities I remembered from news articles I'd read while dying in that hospital bed. The money had multiplied. And multiplied again. But I'd been careful. No social media posts, no flashy purchases, no moves to expensive apartments. I lived like I was broke, worked my normal job, and let my family think I was still the same broke failure they'd always seen. Because I remembered how they'd treated me when I had nothing. I wanted to see how they'd treat me when they thought I still had nothing. And I wanted them to see, eventually, exactly what they'd lost when they bled me dry. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Can't believe how selfish you are. Mom's crying. I deleted it without responding. The game had just begun. The memory of my previous death was crystal clear, sharper than any other memory from that life. I'd collapsed at work on a Tuesday afternoon, just fell over my desk, my vision blurring, pain radiating through my chest. My coworkers called an ambulance. I'd refused at first. I knew I couldn't afford it, but they'd called anyway. At the hospital, the doctors found the tumor, stage 4, pancreatic cancer. If I'd caught it earlier, I might have had a chance. But I'd ignored the symptoms for months because I had no insurance. I'd used all my money paying my family's debts instead of buying a healthcare plan. Do you have family we can call? The nurse had asked gently. I'd given them my mother's number. She'd showed up 2 days later, annoyed that I'd listed her as my emergency contact. This is so like you, Sarah, to create drama and pull me away from important things. I was dying, and she thought it was drama. My father came once, stayed for 10 minutes, told me I should have taken better care of myself. Melissa never came at all. She was too busy planning her second honeymoon, the one I'd helped fund 6 months earlier. The Katya. Hospital bills piled up. $47,000, then $89,000, then $156,000. They showed me the numbers like they were showing me my death sentence, which I supposed they were. Do you have any assets? The hospital financial counselor asked. Any savings? Any family who can help? I'd laughed. Actually laughed. It came out bitter and broken. I'd spent 4 weeks dying in that hospital, alone mostly. The nurses were kind, but busy. I watched TV shows about people with families who loved them, who showed up, who cared. On my last day, when I could barely breathe and the morphine wasn't enough to stop the pain, my mother finally came back. "Before you go," she'd said, leaning close, "you should know Tom's business failed. We took out a second mortgage and we're drowning. I know you don't have much, but is there anything? Any account we don't know about? Any way you can help us even now?" I died 6 hours later, at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday, with those words ringing in my ears. Then I woke up, not in a hospital, not in the afterlife, in my old apartment, the one I'd rented at 21, 3 years before my death. My alarm was going off. My phone showed March 15th, 2020. My 21st birthday. I'd scrambled for my laptop, checked the date, checked the news. COVID-19 was spreading. The lockdowns hadn't started yet, but were coming. The stock market hadn't crashed yet. Bitcoin was at $9,872. I had memories of two timelines, one where I lived and died, and one that was about to unfold. I'd sat on my floor for 3 hours, shaking, crying, trying to understand. Was this real? Was I insane? Had the morphine finally broken my brain and this was my dying hallucination? Then my phone rang. My mother. "Happy birthday, sweetie," she'd chirped. "Listen, your father and I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come by the house this weekend? It's about the restaurant." The restaurant. The first ask. The beginning of the end. "Sure, Mom," I'd said, my voice hollow. After I hung up, I'd made a decision. If this was real, if I really had been given a second chance, I wasn't going to waste it. I'd opened my laptop and started researching investment platforms. That first day, I had $50,247 in my savings account. Money I'd saved from working through high school and college, from scholarships, from every penny I could scrimp. In my previous life, my parents had gotten all of it that weekend. This time, I'd moved $50,000 into a Coinbase account and bought Bitcoin at $9,872. I kept $247 in checking and told my parents when they asked that weekend that I'd had unexpected medical expenses and only had $20,500 left. My mother had cried. My father had raged. Melissa had called me selfish. They'd taken the $2,500 anyway. But I'd kept the Bitcoin. The pandemic hit 2 weeks later. The market crashed. Bitcoin crashed. I'd held on, sweating, watching my $50,000 briefly become $35,000, then $30,000. But I remembered. I knew what was coming. Bitcoin hit $20,000 by December. I'd sold half, made $100,000, and immediately diversified. Zoom stock, Peloton, Moderna before the vaccine was announced. I worked my day job like normal, lived on my salary, and let my portfolio grow. By my 22nd birthday, I had $500,000. My family asked for money twice more that year. Once for Melissa's wedding, $30,000, they said. Once for a business opportunity for Tom, $45,000. I told them I was broke both times. They stopped inviting me to family dinners after that. I didn't care. I was building something they couldn't touch. GameStop happened, huh? I'd remembered the Reddit chaos, the short squeeze. I'd bought at $13, sold at $380. Another $200,000. I'd invested in NFTs early, sold before the crash. Bought tech stocks during dips. Made angel investments in startups I remembered succeeding. Every move was calculated, based on memories of news articles I'd scrolled through while dying. By 23, I had $1 million. By 24, $3 million. I'd met with wealth managers under fake names, set up LLCs, created investment structures. I'd been careful, so careful, to leave no trail that led back to broke Sarah Chen, data analyst. But I'd also been planning, waiting, because I knew what was coming. I knew that eventually somehow they'd find out, or I'd make sure they found out. And when they did, I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd thrown away when they'd bled me dry and left me to die alone. 3 months after their first visit to my apartment, my mother showed up again, this time without warning. I opened the door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to find her standing there with groceries. I felt bad about how we left things. she said, pushing past me. I brought breakfast. Let's talk. This was new. In my previous life, they'd just kept taking. They'd never tried this approach, the guilt trip reconciliation. I watched her unpack eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, expensive coffee. Things she knew I loved. Things that probably cost $80. You look tired, she said, starting to cook. Are you taking care of yourself? I'm fine, Mom. You work too hard. You should find a nice man to settle down with, like Melissa did with Tom. Tom, who was cheating on Melissa with her best friend. I knew because in my previous life, Melissa had found out a year from now and they'd gotten divorced. It had cost her $50,000 in legal fees, money she'd borrowed from me and never repaid. I'm not really looking right now, I said. You're 24, your eggs are getting old. I was 24, my eggs were fine. But this was classic Mom. Make me feel inadequate so I'd be more pliable. She served breakfast, sat down across from me, and smiled warmly. I want to apologize for what I said last time. It was unfair. You work hard for your money. You have a right to spend it how you want. This was the trap, the warm-up before the real ask. Thanks, Mom. But I also want you to understand that family is important. We look out for each other. Your father and I, we've sacrificed so much for you and your sister. We just want to know that if we're ever in real trouble, you'll be there. I told you, I don't have the money you need. Her smile tightened. I'm not asking for money today. I just want us to be close again. I miss my daughter. She missed her ATM. We ate breakfast. She asked about my job, my life, my friends, pretended to care about my answers. It was almost convincing. As she was leaving, she hugged me tight. I love you, baby. You know that, right? I love you too, Mom, I said, because that's what you say. Even when it's complicated. Even when it hurts. She pulled back, her eyes suddenly sharp. Your father's restaurant really is in trouble, though. If we can't make the next lease payment, we'll lose it. Everything we built. Everything you helped us start. There it was. I helped you start? I asked carefully. Well, you co-signed the lease, remember? No, I hadn't. Not in this life. In my previous life, yes. They'd made me co-sign because their credit was terrible. But this time, when they'd asked, I'd refused. I'd been mysteriously sick the day we were supposed to go to the lawyer's office, and they'd eventually found another co-signer. Mom, I didn't co-sign anything. Yes, you did. You co-signed the lease and the equipment loan. You're on the hook for $120,000 if we default. She was lying, trying to scare me into giving them money. I'd like to see the paperwork, I said calmly. Her face flushed. Don't you trust your own mother? I'd just like to see what I supposedly signed. It's at the lawyer's office. I don't have it on hand. What's the lawyer's name? I'll call and get a copy. We stared at each other. Her mask had fully slipped now. You've changed, she said coldly. You've become hard. Mean. I don't know what happened to my sweet girl. Your sweet girl died alone in a hospital while you asked for money. I just want to see what I signed, Mom. That's reasonable. She left without another word. The groceries she'd bought stayed in my fridge. I'd paid for them anyway, really, with 3 years of her free meals, free housing, free emotional labor. That night, Melissa called. Mom says you're being a bitch again, she said without preamble. Hi, Melissa. How are you? Don't be cute. Why are you making things hard for them? They're your parents. I asked to see paperwork for something I allegedly signed. That's not unreasonable. God, you're so paranoid. They're not trying to screw you over. We're family. Family, the word they used like a weapon. How's Tom? I asked, changing the subject. He's fine. Great, actually. His new business is taking off. The business that would fail in 6 months, leaving them $90,000 in debt. That's good. What's the business? Cryptocurrency consulting. He's helping people invest. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Tom knew nothing about crypto. In my previous life, he'd lost $60,000 of other people's money and had to flee the state for a while. Sounds promising, I said. It is. He's making real money, unlike some people. The dig was pointed. Look, Sarah, I'll be straight with you. Mom and Dad need $50,000 or they're going to lose the restaurant. I know you have it. I know you've been saving. Just help them out. I'll pay you back myself if they can't. In my previous life, she'd made the same promise. I'd never seen a penny. I don't have it, Melissa. You're lying. I know how much you make. You've been working for 3 years. You have to have at least $30,000 or $40,000 saved up. I have $3,000. Bullshit. What are you spending it on? You live in a shitty apartment. You don't have a car. You don't go on vacations. Where's your money going? Bills, food, student loans, but those loans Mom and Dad co-signed for you, the ones you should be grateful for. Round and round we went. I'm sorry, I said finally. I can't help. Then you're dead to me, Melissa said, and hung up. I'd heard that before, too. In my previous life, she'd said it and meant it for about 3 weeks until she needed money for something else. This time, I hoped she meant it forever. The turning point came on a Tuesday, 6 months after my rebirth. I was at work analyzing data sets for a pharmaceutical company when my personal phone buzzed, a news alert. GameStop stock soars 1,000% in short squeeze phenomenon. I opened my trading app. My position had just become worth $2.1 million. I sold half immediately, moved the money into safer positions, diversified into real estate, bonds, dividend stocks, set up trusts, created a financial fortress. That night, sitting in my small apartment, I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding. Not from my family, not yet, but from myself. I'd been living like I was still poor, still afraid, still the same Sarah who died in debt, but I wasn't her anymore. I had power now, resources, options. I started small, bought myself a new laptop, a good one, upgraded my phone, started eating at better restaurants occasionally, joined a gym, got a massage. I kept my apartment, though, kept my car, kept wearing normal clothes, but I stopped living like I was broke. I also started planning. In my previous life, my family had destroyed me financially. This time, I was going to return the favor, not out of cruelty, out of justice. They needed to understand what they'd done. They needed to face consequences. I hired a private investigator. Cost me $5,000, but worth it. I wanted to know everything about my family's financial situation. The report came back 2 weeks later. It was worse than I'd thought. My father's restaurant was indeed failing, but not because of the pandemic. It was because my father was skimming money off the top to pay for his girlfriend's apartment. Yes, girlfriend, he'd been having a nun affair for 3 years. My mother knew, but she stayed because she didn't want to split assets in a divorce. Better to bleed me dry than lose half the house. Melissa and Tom were drowning in debt, $140,000 between credit cards and personal loans. Tom's cryptocurrency consulting was actually a pump and dump scheme that was going to get him arrested in about 4 months. The restaurant owed $230,000 in back rent, vendor payments, and equipment loans. They'd taken out the loans in the business name, but my father had personally guaranteed them. If the restaurant went under, they'd lose the house too. They were desperate, which meant they'd be coming for me again soon, harder this time. I made another decision. I was going to accelerate the timeline. I was going to force their hand. I set up a meeting with my wealth manager, Patricia. She was the only person who knew my real financial situation. I want to make a public investment, I told her. Something that will get my name in the press. Something my family will see. She raised an eyebrow. Most of my clients try to stay out of the press. Most of your clients aren't trying to prove a point. I invested $500,000 in a local tech startup that had just gone public. I joined their advisory board. I gave an interview to a tech blog about young investors and the power of compound interest. The article came out 3 weeks later. Sarah Chen, 24, turns early Bitcoin investment into $1 million portfolio. The numbers were vague, but the message was clear. I had money, real money. My phone started ringing within an hour. My mother showed up at my apartment at 8 p.m. on the day the article was published. No warning, just pounding on my door like she was trying to break it down. I let her pound for a full minute before opening it. She pushed inside, her face a twisted mess of fury and disbelief. My father was right behind her, and Melissa too. They'd come as a unit like they always did when they needed to strong-arm me. "Is it true?" my mother demanded. "Are you a millionaire?" "Hello to you too, Mom." "Don't you dare get cute with me. That article, is it true?" I could lie. Part of me wanted to, but what was the point? This was what I'd been waiting for. "Yes," I said simply. It's true." The silence was deafening. My father spoke first, his voice dangerously quiet. "How long?" "How long have I had money?" "Don't play games." "About 3 years. Since right after my 21st birthday." I watched it click, watched them realize that every time they'd asked for money, every time I'd said no, every time they'd called me selfish and cruel and heartless, I'd had millions of dollars. My mother's face went purple. "You let us suffer. You let us beg. You watched the restaurant fail while you sat on millions?" "I didn't watch anything fail. You never invited me to Sunday dinners anymore, remember? I was dead to you because I wouldn't give you money I claimed not to have." "You lied to us," Melissa hissed. "You're a liar." "I didn't lie. You asked if I had $50,000 in my checking account. I didn't. You never asked if I had investments." "That's semantics," my father growled. "You knew what we meant." "Did I? Because in my experience, when you ask me for money, what you mean is, give us everything you have and then find more." "We're your family," my mother shouted. "We raised you. We sacrificed for you." This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. "What did you sacrifice?" I asked, my voice cold. "Name one thing." "We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, sent you to college." "You fed me leftovers after Melissa ate. You gave me Melissa's hand-me-downs. The roof was legally required, and I paid for college myself with scholarships and loans. You co-signed because I had to, and you've held it over my head ever since, even though you never made a single payment." "We gave you life. You had sex and got pregnant. That's not a sacrifice. That's biology." My mother lunged at me, actually lunged like she was going to hit me. My father caught her arm. "You ungrateful little bitch," she spat. "After everything we've done, you throw it in our faces." "You mean after everything I've done? I paid for your BMW. I paid the down payment on your house. I paid for Melissa's wedding. I paid Tom's business expenses. I gave you over $150,000 across 3 years of my previous life, and you never paid back a penny." They all froze. "What?" Melissa said. Shit, I'd said too much, revealed too much. "What do you mean, previous life?" my father demanded. I could backtrack, make up a lie, but I was tired of lying. I mean exactly what I said. "I lived this life before. I gave you everything, and you bled me dry, and I died alone in a hospital at 28 with no money and no insurance and $156,000 in medical debt. And when I was dying, Mom, you came to my bedside and asked if I had any hidden accounts you could access. Those were your last words to me." The silence was absolute. "You're insane," Melissa whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe I got a second chance and this time I decided not to waste it on people who see me as an ATM." My mother's face had gone from purple to white. "You're sick. You need help." I needed help in my previous life. I needed insurance. I needed someone to care that I was dying. But you were too busy asking for money. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you. Get out of my apartment." "Not until you agree to help us," my father said. "We need money. You have it. That's how family works." Family works both ways. When have any of you helped me? We raised you. That's what parents do, I shouted, my composure finally breaking. That's the bare minimum. You don't get unlimited access to my bank account because you performed basic parental duties. You owe us, my mother said coldly. We made you who you are. You made me who I am? I laughed, sharp and bitter. You made me terrified of my own family. You made me feel worthless. You made me think love was transactional. You made me die alone. Yeah, you made me who I am. And who I am now is someone who says no. I walked to my door and opened it. Leave now, or I call the police. You wouldn't, Melissa said. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. They left, cursing and shouting threats the whole way. My mother promised I'd regret this. My father said I'd never be welcome in their lives again. Melissa said she hoped I died alone. I'd already died alone once. It wasn't that bad. After they left, I sat on my floor and cried for an hour. Not because I was sad, because I was free. The next morning, I filed a restraining order against all three of them. The climax came faster than I expected. 2 weeks after kicking them out, I got a call from my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer now, a good one. Your parents are suing you, she said. For what? Elder abuse and financial abandonment. They're claiming you have a legal obligation to support them, and your refusal is causing them emotional and financial distress. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Can they do that? I asked when I calmed down. They can try. It's a frivolous suit, but it'll cost you time and money to fight. I think they know that. They're hoping you'll settle. How much are they asking for? $500,000 in damages, plus ongoing monthly support of $10,000. I thought about it for approximately 3 seconds. Countersue? For what? Everything. Fraud, emotional distress, harassment. And let's make it public. I want the press at the hearing. My lawyer was quiet for a moment. That's scorched earth. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The lawsuit became a minor sensation. Millennial millionaire sued by parents made local news, then regional, then national. The story had everything: family drama, generational wealth, questions of filial duty. My parents did interviews. They painted themselves as victims. Poor elderly couple, they were 53 and 55, hardly elderly, abandoned by their ungrateful daughter. They'd sacrificed everything for her education. They'd supported her dreams. And now that she was rich, she'd turned her back on them. The comment sections were split. Half the people called me heartless, half called my parents entitled. I didn't respond publicly, but I had my lawyer prepare a defense that was absolutely devastating. The hearing was scheduled for 3 months out. In that time, things got worse. My father's girlfriend went to the press, revealing the affair and the apartment he'd been paying for. The restaurant finally closed, owing vendors over $300,000. Tom got arrested for securities fraud. Melissa filed for divorce. My family was imploding, and they blamed me for all of it. The death threats started arriving by email, anonymous, but I knew they were from extended family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, people I'd barely met but who'd heard I was rich and had opinions about what I owed. I hired security, moved to a better apartment in a doorman building, started actually spending my money on protecting myself. The day before the hearing, my mother showed up at my new building. The doorman called up, and I went down to meet her in the lobby. She looked terrible, thin, haggard, her hair graying. The stress was eating her alive. Please, she said when she saw me. Please, Sarah, drop the suit. We'll drop ours. We'll leave you alone. Just please. Why should I? Because I'm your mother. Because somewhere, under all this money and anger, you still love me. Did I? I honestly didn't know anymore. You asked me for money while I was dying, I said quietly. That's what I can't get past. Not the years of neglect, not the financial abuse, but that moment when I was at my lowest and all you cared about was what you could take from me. I don't remember that, she whispered. I know it hasn't happened in this timeline, but it happened in my memory, and it's just as real to me. You're asking me to apologize for something I didn't do. I'm not asking you to apologize at all. I'm asking you to leave me alone. She stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I never saw her again. The hearing was brutal. My lawyer presented bank records showing every dollar I'd given them in my previous life, documented through emails and texts I'd saved before I died, which I'd recreated from memory this time around. She presented testimony from neighbors about the favoritism, the neglect, the emotional abuse. She presented the private investigator's report about my father's affair and financial misconduct. My parents' lawyer tried to argue that I had a moral duty to support them, that family obligation transcended legal requirements. The judge shut that down fast. This court deals with legal obligations, not moral ones. And legally, an adult child has no obligation to financially support their able-bodied, middle-aged parents. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. My countersuit was awarded $200,000 in damages for emotional distress and harassment. They couldn't pay it. They declared bankruptcy. But it didn't end there. I'd also been working on something else, something bigger. In my previous life, I'd learned that my father's restaurant was built on a property he'd been renting. The building owner was a cranky old man who'd eventually sold to a developer. I tracked down that developer through my investment networks, made him an offer he couldn't refuse, bought the building before the old man could sell it. Then I evicted the restaurant. It was already closed, but my father had been living in the apartment above it, the one he'd been using for his girlfriend. I evicted him from that too. I also bought their house. They'd missed 3 mortgage payments and the bank was about to foreclose. I bought the mortgage, then foreclosed myself. Everything they'd built with my money, I took back. Every asset, every safety net. Melissa and Tom lost their condo in the divorce settlement. They had to split their debts, which left them each owing $70,000 with no assets. I could have helped Melissa. Part of me wanted to. She was my sister, after all. But she'd made her choices. She'd chosen to side with our parents, to bleed me dry, to call me selfish. She'd chosen wrong. The final piece came 6 months after the hearing. I was having lunch at a nice restaurant in Manhattan when I saw her. My mother, working as a hostess. She was wearing a black dress that had seen better days, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked old, tired, broken. She saw me too. Our eyes met across the restaurant. I waited for her to look away, but she didn't. She just stared at me with this expression I couldn't read. Regret? Anger? Grief? I finished my lunch and left a $1,000 tip for my server. Walked past my mother without saying a word. Later that night, she texted me. The first communication in months. I'm sorry. Just 2 words. I didn't respond. 3 years after my rebirth, I was 27 years old and worth $8.4 million. I'd built an investment portfolio that generated passive income of $400,000 a year. I'd started a foundation that provided healthcare funding for young people without insurance. I'd bought a beautiful apartment in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Manhattan skyline. I dated, made friends who liked me for me, not my money. Traveled to places I'd only dreamed about in my previous life. Ate at expensive restaurants and didn't feel guilty. I lived. My family? My father worked at a car dealership. My mother managed a small retail store. Melissa moved to Florida and worked in real estate, struggling to make commissions. Tom got out of prison after 18 months and worked construction. They'd lost everything, the house, the business, the cars, the lifestyle. Everything they'd built on my money was gone. Were they suffering? Yes. Was I responsible? Only in the sense that I'd refused to be their victim again. I didn't feel guilty, not anymore. I'd carried enough guilt in my previous life to last 2 lifetimes. One day, my cousin Rachel reached out. We'd been close as kids before she'd sided with my parents in the lawsuit. I need to tell you something, she said over coffee. Your mother, she's sick. My heart didn't skip a beat. What kind of sick? Breast cancer, stage 3. She has insurance through her job, but it's not great. The copays are killing her. Ironic, almost poetic. And you're telling me this because she's your mother, Sarah. I know what happened. I know they were awful to you, but she's dying. She asked you to guilt me into helping her. Rachel had the grace to look ashamed. Yes. Tell her no. Tell her I said no and I mean it, and she should use the money she gets from working to pay her medical bills like I had to do in my previous life. That's cruel. That's justice. Rachel left angry. I didn't care. But here's the thing about revenge, it doesn't actually make you feel better. It makes you feel powerful, vindicated, justified, but not better. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding my life and destroying theirs. I'd won completely, totally won. And I felt empty, not guilty, not regretful, just empty. So I made one final decision. I set up an anonymous trust that would pay for my mother's cancer treatment. Not from me, she'd never know it was me, just a mysterious benefactor through a charitable organization. I didn't do it because I forgave her. I didn't do it because I thought she deserved it. I did it because I was 28 years old, the age I'd died in my previous life, and I wanted to be better than the people who'd raised me. I wanted to be someone who helped people, even people who didn't deserve it, even people who'd hurt me. Not because of who they were, but because of who I was. She'd still lost everything else. She'd still face the consequences of her choices. But she wouldn't die alone in a hospital bed, wondering if anyone cared. That was more than she'd given me. But I could live with being better. On my 28th birthday, I threw myself a party. A real one, with friends and champagne and a cake that cost $300. I stood on my balcony looking out at the city and thought about the girl I'd been. Both versions of her. The one who'd died broken and alone. The one who'd been reborn into power and revenge. I wasn't either of them anymore. I was someone new. Someone who'd learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice, love, respect. I'd chosen to cut out the people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. And I'd chosen to build a new family from friends who actually cared. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother's number. Thank you. Just 2 words. But somehow she knew. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she was just grateful to whatever force had given her healthcare. I deleted the text. Then I went back inside to my party, to my life, to my future. I'd been given a second chance and I'd used it to save myself. Not from poverty, not from death, but from the people who would have slowly destroyed me with their demands and their cruelty disguised as love. I'd saved myself, and that was worth more than all the millions in my account. That was worth everything. But the story doesn't quite end there, because 5 years after my rebirth, when I was 29 and worth $15 million, I got another call from Rachel. Your father had a stroke, she said. He's asking for you. I didn't go. 3 days later, your mother wants to see you before her surgery. I didn't go. 2 weeks after that, Melissa is getting remarried. She invited you. I sent a gift card for $50 to Bed Bath & Beyond. No note. The thing about cutting toxic people out of your life is that you have to keep cutting. They'll always try to worm back in, using guilt, using fear, using any lever they can find. But I'd learned my lesson. Twice. I built my life into something beautiful. I donated millions to charities. I mentored young women in finance. I fell in love with a kind man who'd also built himself up from nothing and understood the value of money and boundaries. We got married in a small ceremony in Italy. No family present, just friends. On my wedding day, my mother sent a card. Inside was a single sentence. I hope you're happy. I read it, felt nothing, and threw it away. Because I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And that happiness had nothing to do with revenge or justice or proving anyone wrong. It had everything to do with saving myself, investing in myself, and building a life where I was valued and loved and respected. The money was just a tool. The real wealth was the freedom. Freedom from guilt, from obligation, from the chains of toxic family bonds. I'd died once under the weight of those chains. I'd been reborn and I'd refused to pick them up again. That was my real triumph. Not the millions, not the revenge, not watching them lose everything. My triumph was walking away and never looking back, and living a life so full and beautiful that their absence didn't leave a hole. It left space for joy. That's what I'd really invested in, myself. Best investment I ever made, and the return's priceless.